Today I'm going to be painting a watercolor landscape in my tiny watercolor sketchbook that I made myself. And I'm going to put the inspiration picture on screen. It's not exactly a reference and the composition is quite different, but I referenced it a lot to figure out the shading and the different details. So I'm starting the painting with filling in the shapes of the fence that was in the foreground. I thought this would be the easiest because it's at the front of the painting and then I can paint the rest around it. At first I tried to do a few different colors and kind of follow the shading pattern on the photo, but I decided to mainly just use one color and then go back in with layering. And now I'm painting the mountains in the background, and the color I used was a bit too dark, so I went back in with some water to blend it out. And I'm going to be doing lots of layering with this painting, as I always do with watercolor. So this is just the first layer, and I'm trying to make it really light so that those colors could act as the highlights of the painting. Now I'm moving on to the grass, and again I'm keeping it light and muted for now. So I'm just filling in the gaps in the fence with some more green, since you can see the field through the fence. Now I'm trying to create some dirt texture at the front where the road is going to be. And again, this is just the first layer, so I'm not too worried about making sure all the textures and all the different colors are there, and just painting a base for me to work off later. I then added some bushes in the background using a darker green color, and again I have to paint around the fence, and I'm painting a few different lines of bushes that you'll see in a few minutes. So there is the last one, and I'm trying to paint this one a bit lighter, and that's the one that kind of covers the mountain. I went back in and added some darker shading to the mountain, and I kind of regret this because I was going for that smoky, like atmospheric perspective look, but I think it still looks pretty good. So now I took a smaller, thinner brush, and I'm going in with color that's a lot darker to do all the shading on the fence and make some wood texture. It looks really dark right now, but it's actually going to dry lighter than you think. I also mixed a brown color that was a bit lighter and filled in a few of the mid-tone areas in there as well. So after adding a few details, I'm finally moving on to the trees again, and I'm adding some shading in a darker color since the trees have dried. And I'm mostly going at the bottom, but also adding a few random little spots all around the trees or bushes or whatever you want to call them. This is just a quick little painting, so that's about it that I'm going to be doing with the shading, but if this was a more detailed painting, I would go in with a lot more layers and probably bring in a few other colors. So now I'm adding a bit more vibrance to the grass with a brighter green color, especially closer to the front, to try to emphasize that smoky look. And just adding a few grass details and textures, and some grass growing alongside the road. Now I'm painting on the road again, and I'm just using some dark brown for the shading and the texture on the road. And then I painted some little dots trying to follow the texture in the picture, but there was too much contrast, so I blended it out with some water. So now I'm just going back in on the fence and adding some darker shading, making sure there's enough contrast with the fence and what's in the background, and that it stands out enough. And also adding just a little bit more darker shading to the bushes and the trees in the background. And that's the painting. And this only took me about 20 minutes, so by no means this is a masterpiece. This is just a tiny painting in my sketchbook. So I hope you enjoyed.